Okay, well, hello and welcome to City Daily. My name is Ash. I lead the Fish Pond site here. I'm joined by a good friend. We have been on City Daily together before, and it's absolute privilege to welcome back to City Daily Lydia Hyons. Lydia, hello.
Hello.
For those of you who don't know Lydia, you haven't had the privilege, Lydia is based now up in the northeast of England. Lydia, could you just give us a bit of a kind of 30-second rundown in terms of who you are, what you give most of your time to, what your passions are, maybe what some of your dislikes are, just so we get a feel for who you are, who we've got on City Daily today.
So I am in Newcastle upon Tyne, and I work part-time as programme manager of a gallery called Shieldfield Artworks that is run by the Methodist Church. So we kind of look at how art, faith and community activism work together, and we're very embedded in Shieldfield in our local area, which is quite a deprived area but has an amazing community there, a lot of lovely people. I'm also an artist, and I'm currently writing a book on hospitality and how that fits into faith.
But I wanted to spend some time talking with Lydia really about I suppose the whole theme, the whole concept of creativity. And I wanted to bring Lydia on because she's a practicing artist, but she's also someone, probably more significantly, someone who knows and loves God and is kind of living at the, I don't want to say the intersection of those things, like they're two entirely separate things, but someone who I suppose loves God and loves creativity. So that's why Lydia is with us today. I think that's actually a really helpful place to start. And some people might be asking the question, what on earth does God have to do with creativity, or vice versa? And you know, I'm convinced, partly having talked to you over the years, that the two are intimately linked. But Lydia, would you just be able to give us a bit of a feel for, I suppose, just a sense of what the Bible says about creativity, what God has to say about creativity might be quite helpful for us.
Yeah, there's quite a lot, and I'll start with what there's been a fair bit of thinking done on, and then actually I'll go on to talk about something that I've been learning recently that actually has challenged me quite a bit. So at the beginning of the Bible, in Genesis, we see that God is creative, and actually the first thing that he chooses to record about himself is that he is creative, and he has made us, he has made our world. So we begin with creation right at the beginning, and we see that God creates out of nothing. There isn't anything to start with, and he creates out of nothing. And I guess his mechanism of creation is to speak. So his word is his creative action, his creative activity. The way he creates is to speak, and things become. And we also see that he names things. He names the stars and the earth and the water, and he kind of gives identity and purpose, and he categorizes those things. And you see that in creativity and in art, that it does give identity to things, it does give purpose, and it categorizes the world in a way that maybe other areas don't. And he also orders the world. So his creation is ordered, and it is also built upon. So in the first 3 days, he creates the sun and the moon and separates water and earth. And then in the next 3 days, he goes back and he inhabits those spaces and puts birds in the sky. So it's an ordered way of creation. He's kind of ordering the chaos as it was, but he goes back and adds to that. So it's not like he makes something and it's perfect. And I guess there's also, we see that he evaluates and he reflects on his creativity. So he says, this is good, this is good, this is very good. So he is implying that there's still work to be done, that creativity is not just we're done action. It's I want to add to this, I want to flourish this. And that's not actually a bad thing. The world was made to be flourished and to be nurtured, and man was put into the world to nurture its space. So there's kind of a sense that God brings man into his creative action. Like he allows Adam to name things, to name all the animals.
Okay.
And he finds delight in seeing Adam do that. And then we kind of talk about being made in the image of God, and that has lots of different attributes, because God has lots of different attributes. He's loving, he's kind, he's compassionate, and he's creative as well. And so if we're made in that image, then we are also creative. But it's a different kind of creativity, because God creates out of nothing, but we create from what God has already created. So God is the creator, and we are recreators. He's bringing us into that participation, but it's slightly different.
Okay.
So, but I think also he, when we read, I think Genesis 2, it talks about he makes trees, but he makes them pleasing to the eye and good for food. So creativity, he doesn't just create for function's sake. He creates for creating beauty and a space that is actually, and we talked about this last time, hospitable for humans to be in and to flourish. And it's a place that enriches. So he creates functionally, but also beautifully. And then also we see in Exodus 31, it talks about, it's one of the first times we hear of someone being filled with the Spirit. So there's these two guys, I forget their names. I can't remember their names, but they're artists and they're filled with the Spirit. But that looks like, being filled with the Spirit looks like being given wisdom and skill and ability to make, and also to be able to teach others to make. And so their work, how they worship and honor God, is through their creativity. So it's such it must be such an important thing if it's the first thing that God talks about. He is a creator, and also the first time we see that the Spirit fills somebody in order to give them ability to be creative, like that. It must be important.
Even as you say that, Lydia, it made me think about thinking about the first 5 books of the Bible, and thinking about, for example, the tabernacle, and actually later the temple. And often, when God, he gives instructions to us in terms of building these things, is actually very, very, very specific in terms of the materials and how it's constructed, and the lengths and the dimensions. And it's, having recently, again, gone through those books again, I'm absolutely, blown away, really, that this is actually really important to God. Things that maybe we thought, well, what does it matter what material it's from? Clearly from the Bible, the way that things are constructed and the way that things look and appear, again, but being pleasing to the eye, are actually really important to him. That was a real, surprise and encouragement to me recently. Yeah,
I've been reading a bit of Exodus, and it talks about the different materials that the outer of the tabernacle is made out of, and the very outside is made out of furry ram's hair or something that's pretty ugly. And the inside, there's like 5 different layers. The inside is made out of purple and red and this luscious material. And it's a symbol, like it symbolizes how we see Jesus, because there's a bit in Isaiah that talks about I'm really bad at remembering verses, but it talks about Jesus, like nobody looked at him as something that was beautiful, like he was a bruised reed, and that's what we see on the outside, but actually it's on the inside of the temple where we see how beautiful Jesus is and what he actually did. So those different stages of how we see Jesus. That's one way of looking at it, anyway. Wow. But yeah, just and the skill that went into making that, and the specification and the beauty of it is all important.
So I think when we first met 4 years ago or so, probably one of the first things that we talked about was, I think I probably said to you that I appreciate and really value creativity and creative things. I appreciate those things, but I feel kind of ill-equipped to really contribute into that world. I don't particularly feel very creative, and I know we've had conversations since, and creativity comes in various forms. But I think probably a number of us today will feel like, okay, I feel like I'm a consumer of these things, but I don't feel like I'm particularly producing or contributing. Is that a bad thing? Is that an okay thing? Are there ways of us moving from being consumers to being contributors? What could you just help us in terms of that sort of development?
Yeah, so I think we are all consumers, and we're consuming our creativity all the time that we just don't realize. So from what you're wearing to your Instagram to the graphics on your IPA can to the design of your IKEA armchair, even going to a gallery, like we consume that all the time. But I think it's the way that you interact and engage with that is important. And as with any of life, we don't just want to consume passively. We want to be actively engaging and understanding God's world and how He's made it. So I think, well, this kind of fits in with the other part of the first thing we were talking about, that art is also for like a common good. In Jeremiah, we're told to seek the welfare of the city. And art isn't just to look beautiful or because we're made in God's image. It's also to seek the common good of our society. And so if we're trying to do that and engaging in how to do that in the art world or creatively, that's active and that's not passive. So for example, art teaches you to see and pay attention to your surroundings, to be creative, to notice things. So we can all do that. We can do that by taking a photograph, and we can do that by sitting and drawing and looking at the world and being okay with making mistakes and messes. And I think people have a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And this often stops me if I haven't made anything for a while. I'm scared that I'm not going to be good enough, or
okay.
So I think just getting past that fear and being okay with making mistakes and messes and being creative so that we can pay attention to our surroundings. I think art and creativity, I'm kind of putting into one, they're slightly different things, but anyway, it discloses different aspects of the world that we don't always see there. So some of the work that we do at the gallery that I work at is allowing people's voices who aren't heard, people who are downtrodden or who just aren't listened to, allowing their voices to be heard. So it's disclosing how they view the world to others. And so we can engage in that way. I think we're all creative in some aspects, and I think a lot of us either say I'm creative and I'm arty, or I don't have a creative bone in my body. And actually, if we've seen that we are made in the image of a creative God, then we know that that's not true. And it's finding those areas where we see our creativity, whether that's the way that you arrange your living room, or cooking, or problem solving can be creative.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually sitting down and knowing that you are and can be creative, but that has different forms, and trying to see where those forms come out, and then nurturing that. We nurture ourselves in other ways, but often if you're scared or you don't think that you're creative, you won't nurture that aspect of yourself. And I think it's important to and then to use that to enrich and transform and influence our society. Whether that's on the micro scale of something that you've made for a close friend, or whether that's on the macro scale of getting involved in the conversations that are happening in the art world, or in society in general, in a more creative way, because there are so many conversations going on. And I once heard that art, and this probably is a big claim, artists are the prophets of our time, because if you look at what's happening in the art world 50 years ago, the conversations that were happening about gender, about equality between men and women, that was happening ages ago in the art world, and it's filtered down into everyday society conversation now. So in order in order to transform and influence our society, we need to be part of those conversations.
Absolutely.
And we need to be listening. We really need to listen before we go in guns blazing. Not that we would ever go in guns blazing, but yeah. And so it's engaging in that and not being scared to ask your artist friends or people who are engaging with that daily about how to do that. Maybe that's going to an exhibition and then having a conversation about that with someone afterwards, not just passively walking around, but actually engaging with what is being said, what is being discussed.